Welcome to Critical DMG, a podcast about two best friends who might have grown up but never grew out of their love for the Game Boy. We will be playing and reviewing every North American title released on Nintendo's original handheld console. This is episode 4. I'm Tony, and wowie zowie, do I wish that this had just been a Pong clone.
Wowie zowie. And I'm Jeff, and today we'll be talking about tennis. Before we begin, a little podcast news. I have started tracking my quiz results. I'm currently at around 78%, so doing pretty good.
Yes.
Doing pretty good.
C student.
C's get degrees, so that's what we're going with. And so yeah, trying to keep that, we'll say above a 70%. So hopefully I can at least keep that today. But on that same note, I believe we have a quiz question from last time to go over.
That's right. So in the Alleyway episode, the question at the end was, while you don't start with too many lives in Alleyway, you do get more for every 1,000 points that you increase your score by while you're playing. But that only happens as long as you don't already have the maximum number of lives, and if your score is not over what number?
I was very confident on this.
What do you think?
It definitely 10,000. I don't know why, but they made 10,000 the cap. Once you get to 10,000, you no longer get extra lives.
That's right. You will earn extra lives until you get to 10,000 or more. I guess it's probably just that they feel after you reach that point, you don't need the help anymore.
You're just good enough.
You're just so good that what do you need the extra lives for?
All right. Yeah, with our quiz question out of the way, let's get into it. Let's talk about some tennis, some immediate opinions. So, Tony, should someone dust off their Game Boy, play tennis today? Yes or no?
No.
Absolutely not.
Nope.
I agree.
Nope. I have a zero no on this one.
I completely agree. So I guess before we get into that, can you give us a little bit of a background or maybe tell us what Nintendo said that should have convinced us to pick up this box and play this game?
Oh, I will. On the back of this box, tennis, anyone. Game Boy Tennis for realistic match play action. You can try power serves, skillfully placed shots, lofty lobs, and killer cross courts. Umpire Mario will call the close ones. So, get ready to serve and match the baseline. It's tennis for everyone. And then also in bold, it says challenge the Game Boy or use your Game Link cable to take on a friend in head-to-head competition.
Interesting. We'll talk about that a little bit more later in the mechanics. But before we dive into the mechanical discussion, I did want to kind of preface this episode with the fact that sports games are probably one of my least favorite genres of games. So that probably doesn't help my decision at all. But yeah, I've just always found, especially if it's a game that I play or a sport that I play, I would always rather be playing the sport in real life than playing the game of it. On top of that, I feel like the controls always seem a little bit clunky, but we'll talk a bit more about that in the mechanical discussion.
It's funny that you say that because I actually don't particularly care for sports or sports games, but there are some that I really gravitate to, and tennis games like Mario Tennis are one set of them. So I actually kind of went into this one with, I don't know if I would say high hopes.
That's interesting. Yeah. So I enjoy playing sports. I've grew up playing baseball, so I'm sure I'll have a lot to say next week in our baseball episode, but I grew up with a lot of sports, and yeah, anytime a game is trying to be realistic in the sport, those are the games I don't like. Mario Tennis, Mario Golf, those sort of things, I really enjoy because it's a game, right? It's a game. It's not the sport.
Yes. They stretch the truth of it to make it so that
exactly
the bones of the sport you're playing are there, but there's, power-ups or different special things that give it a flavor that makes it not quite the sport one for one.
Exactly. So we'll try to be as subjective. We'll try to be non-biased as possible. If you love sports games, feel free to write in and tell us how we're doing it wrong. But is there anything else you want to kind of preface or talk about the background of this game? Or
information about this game was actually pretty slim. When I was looking for background information, development information, any sort of, I don't know, tangential relevant information from the time and onward, unfortunately, I didn't find that much for Game Boy Tennis. I found a decent amount for the NES original, but not so much for this one.
yeah, it was not originally developed for the Game Boy, so it was kind of just brought over from those other systems.
I think that about covers it, though. I am ready. I took quite a bit of notes. I am ready to get into this one.
All right, let's talk about the mechanics. So, Tony, how far did you get into the game?
I think that this is my worst showing of a game that we have played so far. If you are watching this on YouTube, get ready for probably the worst gameplay of a game that you may have ever seen in your life.
Interesting. Okay, so there are 4 levels, level 1, 2, 3, and 4, that you can play against. I guess, which levels did you play on? What was your experience with that?
I have to say that I went in at the lowest level because I assumed it would be better. I didn't really know what I was doing. I wanted to get a feel for the game. Like I said, I do like tennis video games. Mario Tennis on the 64 is actually a game that I really enjoy. So I assumed that it would be pretty similar to other video game tennis iterations. So I started on the easiest level, the level 1 difficulty, and I sucked eggs. I felt like I could not make a volley to save my life, and I never felt at any point that I was getting it. I wasn't progressing. I never felt, oh, okay, well, if I hit this way, then I'll be able to do this, or, oh, well, I can take this strategy and maybe score a point here. And it was really discouraging. I checked the manual to see if maybe I was just not figuring the controls out very well. I could not figure out what the hurdle was that was keeping me from really clicking with this one. So, defeated. I think my score at the end of my level 1 gameplay was like 1-6-1 or 1-5-0-6 or something. It was awful. It was abysmal. Just the worst showing imaginable. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to keep playing. I'm going to crank the difficulty up. You know, I already lost on the lowest difficulty, so what's the worst that could happen when I switch to the higher difficulty? And I'm sure that there is some sort of improvement to the computer players' like behavior as far as maybe the decisions that they make or how they respond to your hits of the ball at the higher difficulties. But mostly what I noticed at the higher difficulty was that the computer player was a lot snappier about when they would get the ball back to you. And so even though I was losing still, I wasn't scoring really any more points on the level 4 difficulty than I had on the level 1. I actually enjoyed it more because despite still performing pretty poorly as far as actually scoring points or winning a match or anything like that, it was fun because I was getting a volley of back and forth built up with the computer that would ultimately end when one of us would catch a lob shot and the other person wouldn't be able to move in time. So I actually enjoyed it way more on the higher difficulty, or I'm sorry, on the highest difficulty than I ever did at the lowest. And that's, I don't know, it was a very interesting experience for me.
Did you go back and try level 1 again? Or after you tried level 4, did you just kind of wash your hands with it?
I didn't go back to try level 1 again. I went back down to level 2 after level 4, just as I guess another comparison. And I struggled in the same way that I did at level 1. And so I didn't finish that. I think I stopped after maybe the first or second exchange of position at level 2. And I don't actually remember if I finished the level 4 or not. I would have to go back and check my footage to see if I did. But There was no way. After how much I had enjoyed and felt like I might actually continue to play if I really wanted to see if I could get better at it, I would only play at the higher level. I would never want to go back down to the lowest one.
Interesting. Yeah, so I started on level 1. Again, kind of similar thought of brand new game, getting used to the controls, etc. I've played tennis. I know tennis.
I've played tennis with you.
We have played IRL tennis.
I know.
My first attempt through level 1, I won maybe the first set, 0 games, barely scored any points. My first point may have been in set 2. Set 2, I think I got 1 game, but yeah, I think it was like 0-6, 1-6. And if people aren't familiar with tennis scoring and everything, essentially each game, you have game, sets, and match. So the match is comprised of, in this game, best of 3 sets. And then each set is essentially first to 6 games. There's a bit more nuance, but yeah, when we say we won 1 game in 2 sets, that's 1 game out of 12 with 12 losses. After that, yeah, I similar to you, felt like there just was clearly something that was not clicking.
Yep.
Something about it. So I also then was like, okay, I'll go to level 4 and see what that's like.
Wild.
I maybe won a couple points in the 2 sets. So you need 5 points, right? 15, 30.
15, 30, 40. And then if they haven't gotten a point back, then you win.
Yeah. So each game, you essentially need 4 points. Again, a little bit more nuance on tennis. If you know tennis really well and you're screaming at the podcast, I apologize. But you essentially need 4 points to win a game. I probably won 1 or 2 points in the entire 2 sets of level 4. I then went back to level 1 and crushed it. I think I probably dropped 3 games in the 2-set win. So yeah, just absolutely crushed the computer.
Wow.
Easy. At no point did I really feel like I was in danger of losing. Most of the games that I did lose, I felt were kind of my own fault for trying to be too cute or trying to, be a little fancier than I probably should have. So I find it interesting. We both tried level 1, then went to level 4, and then kind of came back. I thought about kind of trying level 2, level 3, level 4 again. And I didn't really have any desire to. I beat the computer that one time and I was kind of ready to be done with it.
I feel, and I want to know if you and I are on the same wavelength about this, but I feel that this game could have been so much better with the addition of either a dive or like a run or a dash, just something to give you a little extra mobility for when the computer player cuts the ball like diagonal across the screen. Everything is super slow. I would have felt much better about missed shots if I at any time had thought I would have been able to potentially cover the ground to actually reach them. So I'm curious to know if you feel the same way.
Yes. So I'm going to initially put a pin on the dive, sprint, that functionality, because I definitely do want to come back around to that.
Okay.
I guess let me quickly explain the controls, at least as far as I understand them.
Sure.
So people kind of understand what we're talking about. So you have a player, you're playing tennis, obviously. So if you don't know what tennis is, you're hitting a ball back and forth with a racket. Yeah, very simplistic. You move your character around with the D-pad. A is kind of a normal shot, and B is a lob shot. So essentially you hit it higher up in the air, usually used to hit it over your opponent if they're at the net. You can, as you're hitting your shot, use the directional pad to influence where it goes. My understanding is you have to be pressing the directions as you're hitting the shot.
Okay.
It's not afterwards. It's as you're hitting the shot, you have to be holding the direction that you want to be, I guess, that you want the shot to go. So if you just hit a normal shot, neutral, you're not holding on the D-pad, it'll go kind of directly to the center of the other court.
Oh.
Which is nice. If you're in a bad spot or whatever, and you just need to kind of reset, you can kind of do that and get a volley going back along. But if you're in a bit more of like an attack position or something like that, you can hold kind of the direction pad to aim it more left, aim it more right, try to hit it like right on the line, or try to get your opponent out of position so you can then, put another shot somewhere else and they won't be able to get to it. Kind of general controls as I understand them.
Okay.
And to some of that I kind of liked because it did feel similar to kind of the mind games that you're playing or the strategy that you're kind of going through with tennis.
Yeah.
You had mentioned, moving really slow, et cetera, et cetera. One of the things that I am very bad at in real tennis is I will hit my shot and I will stop. And then they hit it on the other side of the court. Mm-hmm. I don't have time to get there because I've stopped where I was.
Right.
So one of the things I constantly have to remind myself when I'm actually playing tennis is hit the shot, get back to center of court.
It's like DDR.
Exactly. Get back to a neutral position to where you can then react.
Right.
That's also something that I had to constantly remind myself while playing this game. Because, if you're on one side of the court and they hit it on the other side, 0% chance you're getting there.
No, you're hosed.
Exactly.
You will never make it in time.
So I did kind of notice that is, again, one of the things that I have to constantly remind myself when I'm playing actual tennis that I had to also remind myself in this game, which I kind of find to be interesting or like a little quirk, I guess.
I think that a big part of the issue was that the use of the motion, like the directional input, and how it not only steered your player character around the court to where you wanted to position yourself, but also controlled the trajectory of your hits. Something about that, maybe just because this is an older game, or maybe because I'm just not used to playing tennis games as much as I used to be, I was constantly hitting the ball in what felt like totally ineffective ways. Not so much that I was not hitting it where I wanted it to go, like left or right, but I found, especially with, and I don't think we had talked about this yet, smash attacks, where if your opponent lobs the ball, you can, if you're standing in the right place and you swing while the ball is directly over your head, you'll do a smash. I never made a single smash shot go over the net. Not one time. Every single smash shot, no matter what direction I was pressing on the D-pad, what button I had pressed on my own face buttons, nothing. Every time I returned as a smash, it would just careen right into the net and fall, and that was all that she wrote about that.
I don't think I connected with a single smash. I got to the point where I would just stop trying because I clearly didn't understand where I was supposed to be or the timing or anything. So I would just run back and try and hit a normal shot. So
I was trying. I like that. I like the return smash. I think that that's a cool mechanic, and they obviously want you to use it, but it just never worked for me. Mm-hmm. The only points, though, funnily enough, that I actually seemed to score on the computer player were tipping the ball over the net and it just sliding into their side with no way for them to return because you can't scoop. Like you can hit it if it's still low, but by the time it just drops like a rock onto their court, you can't scoop in this game to try and get the ball back up or anything. So it was basically just a free point, but I would watch it hit the tip of the net and just kind of tumble over. And man, does that sure not feel like a good way to score points a lot of the time.
Just like in real tennis. But so I guess taking that pin out, and I think that is part of the reason I'm not a huge fan of games that are trying to be realistic with sports games.
Yeah.
Because you either have the older games like this one where it's just not a lot of functionality, there's no advanced movement, anything like that. Or I feel like a lot of the newer games, you have so much advanced movement and options to do things that it makes the learning curve extremely high. And so that's why I think I've always kind of been averse to sports games is they just don't feel like the sport. They don't feel like you're playing it. It feels like you should be able to dive or do a lunge, or once you kind of get the controls to aim your shots down a little bit. A decent tactic, or at least a decent beginner tactic, I'll say, is constantly hitting it on the same side of a court, because your opponent will hit it back, run to the center, have to switch position to run back, and you can kind of get them off guard with that. Whereas on the Game Boy, you don't have inertia, etc. Your player's just instantly able to switch positions. So realistic feel is just not there.
And this is definitely pretty accurate for tennis rule keeping. When reading the manual, they list tennis terms, things like fault, let, all of the scoring term explanations. It's all in there. They obviously want it to feel like tennis, the sport. They have an umpire that makes the calls. They have the changing of the sides. They have the different kinds of shots. You can control where you're able to go, and all of the different scoring is still present in the game. Your matches and your sets and everything are represented on a scoreboard. They want it to feel like tennis, the sport game. But I want it to feel like fantasy tennis. I want it to feel like tennis, the sports anime.
Yeah, exactly. And I guess that's why we both kind of like those other sports games better.
I'm looking forward to more sports games. I'll be honest, I am not looking forward to every single one, because there are sports that I'm just not interested in as much. I have no issues with probably a lot of the ones that we're going to encounter here. I'm looking forward to seeing if they provide a fun game experience. The problem is more likely to be that they're going to be kind of like this, where it's trying to provide an experience closer to the literal game. I don't really know how to describe what we're talking about here, but I want them to be more of a fantasy version of the game, and I think that we're probably not going to get that. So we'll see.
Exactly. At least, if the game title is just tennis, it's probably trying to be a realistic tennis, but that is, I guess, to be expected. I did have a question about more on the game dev side, what you thought the logic behind the computers were. Because they would change their shots. They did seem to move differently, and there was definitely logic there, obviously. And I kind of wanted to get your thought behind this. So I'll give one example. I found that going up to the net was a very easy way to get points, especially in level 1. So especially when you were serving, you could hit it specifically to one side, depending on which side you were serving from, and then move kind of halfway up the court.
Okay.
If you moved all the way to the net, they seem to pretty consistently lob it. But if you moved maybe halfway, they would return it normally. And at that point, you could then move forward to the net and do a shot directly on the other side. And it was almost a guaranteed point every single time. So I kind of want to get your thought on what kind of logic do you think was going on? Obviously, it probably wasn't too advanced. So do you think it was more of like where your character was positioned versus where their character was positioned? Do you think there was like an RNG element to it?
If I had to guess, and this is just from my experience in making the games that I have, and kind of keeping an eye on things like how the computer players behave, if I was to wager a guess, I would think it probably has a lot to do with, one, where your player character is positioned on the court, and two, where the ball is currently positioned on the court. Because there aren't really any other actors in the game. The Mario umpire doesn't actually do anything. It's not like he gets off the chair and interacts with the game in some kind of random way. It's just you, the computer player, and the ball. And like you said, you had noticed that the computer player seemed to consistently react in a certain way, like almost an exploitable way, essentially, based on where you had moved yourself and where you would hit the ball. And you knew that if you crossed this certain threshold on what's presumably the y-axis of the game's 2D screen, you would go past that point and you would see the computer would suddenly change their tact. They would either lob the shot, almost guaranteed, or they would charge the net, or whatever tactic that you watched always seemed to hinge on where you were, and then the ball being where it was sort of seemed to take second place, which might have been how they allowed scoring to happen. I feel like if the ball was the number one target, then it would make it more difficult for the computer to not be where the ball is all the time, which I think I had mentioned with the level 4 computer. The thing that I noticed versus the lower level computer wasn't so much that it was using better or more varied tactics, which it was, to be fair. It was lobbing the ball. It was volleying regularly. Almost any time I would hit the ball, it would be ready to volley back. Definitely more aggressive, and it was making maybe a random, I almost said attack, a random action, like whether it was going to lob or start a volley. That felt maybe a little more random. It would be hard to say how programmed that was. But the major difference is that the higher computer moves a lot more and is a lot more targeted and deliberate in where it moves. So if we can kind of expand on the idea that the computer is tracking where you are on the court to position itself and then moves to face the ball, we can sort of say that on the lower difficulty, maybe the computer is only tracking the court that you occupy in, I don't know, 4 to 6 specific quadrants. And if you are in this left frontmost quadrant that's closest to the left-hand side of the court and the net, maybe it decides it's going to stay far back because it's expecting you to lob. That's just the most basic response that it can have. Whereas if you're back in the back right quadrant where you're farthest away and you're toward the right-hand side of your screen, then maybe it decides I'm going to move closer to the net because, again, that's the most basic action. Whereas on a higher difficulty, maybe that is split into more sections. So instead of only having this imaginary 4 sections that it keeps track of, it suddenly has a multiple of that, and it's got 16 sections to keep track of, and it's just checking where you are at any one time and moving accordingly. And because of that, it makes it seem like it's more deliberate and more targeted because it's constantly going through checks on your position more frequently instead of more generally. That's just my opinion on that. Like I said, unfortunately, development information about this game was really pretty much non-existent. If anybody has any around, I would love to learn a little bit more. So that's just my guess on how that would go, but I don't really know for sure.
Interesting. Yeah. I guess I'd never really put too much thought into how you would make essentially the same computer increase difficulty. And I guess that's a very good way of doing it, is just make it either check more frequently or check more cases and increase the number of actions based on that. To your point, I definitely feel like level 1 at least, I didn't try too much with the other ones, but level 1 at least did seem very, you said exploitable. I said in my notes, I wrote cheesable.
Yeah.
Because it seemed like there were certain actions that you could take that seemed to, 95, 99% of the time result in the exact same outcome. And so I imagine the more difficult PCs probably have the same thing, but maybe with additional checks, additional boundaries, etc., for where they're actually looking, maybe it's a much more difficult, but that's an interesting take.
You'll also notice that, and this it sort of reinforces how I've described it with these different quadrants that it can check on the player side of the court. when you switch sides, when you switch positions, whether you are serving or not serving, you stay on the same side of the court, whether you are serving or you are receiving. So regardless of what position you currently occupy, your court never changes. So that would make it a lot easier and a lot less resource intensive on the Game Boy hardware to be checking your position when it only has to worry about that side of the field, which means that the hardware only has to check your position according to that one side
exactly
at any given time. So I feel like that's probably how they would have gone about it. But again, don't hold me to it, I guess.
To elaborate, you're always on the side that is closest to the screen.
Yes.
They do have a switching sides thing, but the only thing that happens is Mario, who we'll be talking about more shortly, I presume, flip sides. So his little judge seat switch sides of the court, and that's to show that you did actually switch sides and all that fun stuff. But visually, the court really never changes. All right. Is there anything else mechanically or anything like that you want to get to?
No, I think I'm just spoiled on better tennis games.
I could agree with that. Yeah, that's all I have as well as far as the mechanics and kind of gameplay. So I think after a quick break, we'll be right back.
Break time. In a world not too unlike our own, there are creatures known as pups, doll-like beings brought to life through magic. These pups used to live a life of peace and harmony in their forests and towns. This was shattered when the evil king Hocus Pocus arrived and began to use mysterious powers to control the poor pups, turning them into an army bent on world domination. As one of the only remaining pup knights with your own free will, it falls to you to take up sword and shield in defense of the once bustling city of Pup Town. Fight your way through stage after stage of enemies, taking them down in back and forth turn-based combat, gaining experience and coins as you go. Keep yourself upgraded and well-fed back at the tavern and other still inhabited places around the town square. The more of the enemy's army you're able to clear out from around Pup Town, the more its inhabitants will make themselves known to you, maybe even helping you continue to grow stronger and better able to put an end to the evil king's reign of terror once and for all. So get going. There's an adorable cast of sprightly furries that needs your help. Will you be the savior of Pup Town? Pup Panic by Unicorp Entertainment is available now on itch.io for all Game Boy systems and emulators. Can't seem to clear any lines in your Tetris? Stuck underwater in Super Mario Land? The old Pokemon grind got you feeling blue? Then stay tuned to Critical DMG. It won't make you better at Game Boy games, but at least you won't feel so alone in how bad you are at them once you've listened to us. Users must provide their own Game Boy. Batteries not included. Certain conditions apply. Void where prohibited. Critical DMG is not responsible for any worsening gameplay after consuming our podcast. And we're back. And so for this portion of the show, this is, of course, where we talk about things from a more creative and aesthetic angle. Unfortunately, there's not a whole lot to talk about with tennis. There's a title screen, a menu screen, and the court that you're on, and then the swapping sides and like scoreboard animation that you get to see. That's pretty much it. Very bare bones in the visual presentation. Did you feel the same way? Like there just wasn't really a whole lot to be looking at for this one?
Yeah, I mean you're replicating a tennis court, so you have some audience and stuff like that, but it's all the tennis court is the focal point, and it's a tennis court. I think they did a good job of replicating a tennis court, but that's not as interesting as other games that we've played or things like that.
I do think that it is very readable. I think that the player sprites for the player and the computer player are perfectly proportioned. I think that they are distinct enough from each other that it's not super confusing on the Game Boy's screen. And I think that the angle that they went with for how they depict the tennis court is pretty good. I think for the Game Boy screen and the size of the resolution that they had to work with, I think that it is a very readable and accessible interpretation of tennis. And I'm glad that it looks the way that it does. The character sprites really add some charm to what would probably be even more bland without the little bit of character that they managed to instill here.
I agree. I feel like I never had an issue with visual effects. I was never frustrated or felt like the visuals were giving an additional barrier to entry or learning curve or anything like that. Where sometimes these games, they do, you know, your player is kind of blocking some of the screen or the camera movement, because the camera does move a little bit up and down depending on which side the ball is on. I never found that to be distracting or, causing any pain points. That's a positive on a game like this that could have a lot of issues visually with tracking the ball, all of that.
The inclusion of Mario as the umpire is super cute. I like the little calls that he makes, the little windows that show up to say fault or whatever else that he says. I think deuce, I think, is one of the things he says.
Out.
I like those. I think those are super cute.
Yeah, I did like when the ball is close to the line, it'll kind of show where it hits, kind of like a tennis replay, if you will, where they show kind of the mark of where the ball hits.
Right.
So I did like that a lot. I will say there were times when the pixels overlapped and I kind of wanted to challenge the call. But generally, I did like that. Also, did you try to hit Mario at all in his little judge chair, umpire chair?
I didn't. The thought never crossed my mind. Are you trying to confess to some sort of malicious action here?
The first time it happened, it was by mistake. I tried to hit it kind of down the line and went a little bit too far, and it looked like it was about to hit Mario. And I was like, oh, I wonder if you hit him, if there's some sort of animation or like a little Easter egg or something.
Oh, okay.
I tried a couple times and then couldn't quite get it, so I gave up. So I did not maliciously hit Mario with a tennis ball. I tried, but I did not successfully maliciously.
I did not harass the umpire with the tennis racket. Oh my goodness. No, the thought never crossed my mind, but yeah, I don't remember. Do you remember if Mario had any animations really at all? Or if he was pretty much stationary in his chair?
I think the only animations I remember seeing were the little pop-ups that came up.
Yeah, so they weren't actually his sprite.
Yeah.
It was the window pop-ups. Okay. Yeah, I would think he was probably in the background.
Mm-hmm.
I would say that the Mario umpire probably was drawn into the background like the crowd.
Mm-hmm.
And I can't imagine there being a bespoke what happens if you hit umpire Mario animation, because I think he would be drawn in the background. Not that you couldn't still do something to animate him if it was drawn in the background, just that it would be, probably a bigger pain in the butt to do so if he's not on the sprite layer.
Which, again, if someone knows, let us know. But definitely something I thought about and did not see anything come to fruition with that. I did quite like the sound. You had kind of mentioned this earlier. If you're not positioned in the right place, the ball will hit you, which also happens in tennis. I did quite like that sound. The sound of the ball hitting you. It was like quite a nice, I don't know. I found
What is with you? What is happening? You're already talking about maliciously attacking umpire Mario, and now you're telling me that the sound of the ball hitting the player is a good sound. What is tennis bringing out here?
Well, okay, I understand how this looks. It's not like that. But no, I feel like the sound of the ball hitting you, it was just like a nice, thud. it gave the right vibe, right? It gave the right feeling of just kind of like thud. It doesn't hurt when a tennis ball hits you, so it's fine. It's fine.
It doesn't hurt when a tennis ball hits you.
That's what I'm going with.
Okay, we're gonna move on. So, still on the subject of the sound and the music, I have to say I'm pretty disappointed. There was only one music track. I was hoping that at least for the higher difficulty levels, there might be a different track to show that it's a more intense difficulty. So, oh, the match is more intense. We're going to give it a more action-oriented soundtrack or something. But no, it's just the same. No matter what difficulty you're on or whatever, it's just the same track the whole time. It's not a bad track. It's a pretty short loop, inoffensive. I couldn't even hum it for you right now. It has completely escaped my mind. So, serviceable.
Yeah, I probably listened to it for a couple hours probably while I was playing. And yeah, I remember thinking I'm not annoyed at this, but also don't remember it at all. So I guess maybe that's the goal for background music, but...
See, and that's something that I actually am looking forward to with this little journey that we're going on, because a lot of the time, especially with licensed games or puzzle games, of which there are a lot on the Game Boy, just in the really unexpected places that you wouldn't really think it, you will find some of the best music on the system. So just because the gameplay might be lackluster, or it might just be bad, I'm not saying this game in particular, but just in any instance, if a game is bad, sometimes there's a banger soundtrack. So this song could have been a saving grace to this game. The music that was here in the background, if it was better or more memorable, I could have at least been, oh, actually, I really like that background track, and it stuck in my mind. But no, for as long as I definitely wasn't playing as long as you did, but for as long as I was playing tennis, like I said, I couldn't hum you a bar.
Yeah, I remember kind of vibing to it while I was playing, but not enough that it was, I guess, memorable. So a little unfortunate, I suppose.
I do think that they made a good crowd sound, which I think is, a pretty generic thing that you maybe wouldn't expect to be difficult to get right. But I think that they did a good job here. I think that it's a good, it's not super loud. It's not really grating. It doesn't happen all of the time with every shot or every volley back and forth or anything. You only hear it infrequently. And I think it's a good sound. I also think the ball being hit back and forth, it's kind of like a plonk, similar to the alleyway sound, but a little more bouncy, a little deeper. I think the sound design is good overall, especially considering how little of it there actually is to hear. I think that what is there is good and gives you a good sense of what you're doing, where things are, what's happening in the game. It's serviceable. I think they did a good job, inoffensive, thumbs up on sound design.
Agreed. I would say good, but not outstanding.
Sure. That's perfect. Sums it up. Anything else before we round up for my most favorite part?
No, I think that's about it. I mean, I guess the inclusion of Mario is interesting. Do you know, was that included in the other iterations of the Nintendo releases, or was that specific for the Game Boy? I couldn't find any information on that.
The Game Boy version did sort of a graphical overhaul on basically the entire presentation of the game. The NES one is not Mario-ified in the same way. So that was kind of in line with all of the other games, because obviously, if you've listened to the previous Alleyway episode, Mario's in that too. He steers the little ship that is your brick-breaking paddle, and your extra lives is a Mario head. Obviously, Super Mario Land is one of the launch titles for the Game Boy, and then next week's episode on baseball, Mario's on that one too.
Yeah, so I do appreciate kind of the consistency that they were trying to push in, despite maybe not loving just jamming, oh, noticeable character in this game that is completely unrelated. If Mario is playing tennis, great, love that. Can't say that I love the plastering a popular character onto a game, but I do appreciate the consistency with branding, at least that they were going for with the launch titles and all of that. So I can respect that.
It was the 80s.
Of course.
All right. So I think that about does it on that section. Are we ready to move on to the quiz?
We are. All right, so I need 3 out of 3 to increase my my current score, and I'm not hopeful because it is tennis this week, so we'll see.
You shouldn't be, because I had to dig pretty deep to come up with anything to make questions about for this one. Okay, ready to go.
Ready.
Tennis quiz. Question 1. When I was looking things up for this quiz questions, I found a Nintendo Power issue, which I love. I will absolutely be looking through more Nintendo Power stuff for this project. But anyway, there was a small section about the early Game Boy titles like Tennis and Tetris and some other stuff. Whenever they were describing the link cable being usable for multiplayer gameplay, though, they consistently referred to it as something else. What was it called instead of a link cable? Was it A, a multicord, B, a Game Boy multiplayer cable, C, a video link, or D, a friend link?
Oh, I have no idea. This is going to be just a complete guess.
There's an old adage about how you should guess when you don't know.
Are you saying C? Is that the guess?
I'm not saying anything. I'm not. I am totally impartial.
I don't believe in the guess C. I guess adage. Which,
oh no,
again, I need to not tell you these things because then you can use them against me. But I'm gonna go with A. A sounds the best to me, but I again just complete guess, so I have no idea.
You should have respected my my impartiality. It was C.
Oh, you essentially gave that to me and I just threw it away.
I did. I handed it to you on a silver platter.
See, I thought you were trying to reverse psychology that and be like,
nope. See, in our rules document, in our rules guidelines for the show, we specifically said no reverse psychology, remember?
Yeah, but
so that would have been against the treatise that we said.
That clearly doesn't equate to the quiz, but
all's fair in video game quiz questions.
All right, off to a bad start.
Off to a great start. Yes, it was a video link, so it was not just tennis. Anytime Nintendo Power, when I was reading this issue, would reference the link cable, they would call it the video link. And I'm pretty sure, looking through the Game Boy owner's manual, their original manuals for like the DMG Game Boy called it the video link cable. And so you would plug your video link cable into your Game Boy's extension connector and let it do its multiplayer thing. So yeah, video link.
Yeah, so what I've been seeing in, I guess, a lot of the manuals is Game Link, but...
Yeah, apparently it was changed later on. It was in like early owner's manuals. Not like, I guess, maybe the more widely circulated or reprinted ones, but in like some of the earliest manuals, it says video link cable. I think I would have to go back. I do not have the tennis back of the box in front of me, but I think even the tennis box says game link instead of just link cable. Anyway, ready for question 2.
All right, let's go.
Okay. Game Boy Tennis was a pretty direct port, as we had talked about, of the older NES Tennis. That came out almost 5 years prior to the Game Boy Tennis that we were talking about. Apart from the cuter graphics and the perspective on the court that we had mentioned, What was one of the most prominent additions that the Game Boy version has over the original one on the NES? Is it A, that there is a short intermission between sets? Is it B, that the music that plays during the match is there? Is it C, visual references for when the umpire makes their call? Or D, the two-player multiplayer mode?
Oh, I don't think it's D. I think they all had two-player mode, which one of the things I found interesting is 1v1 was not an option. You would play doubles together against the computer. It wouldn't be like a 1v1 match is what I saw was the two-player. I was really hoping that Mario would be one of the answers because we already talked about that.
You said you can rule out D. You said it's not the multiplayer, so then it's either A,
Yep.
the short intermission that happens when the sets are changed over.
Which I'm pretty sure there has to be an intermission because I think that is some of like loading screen nonsense.
Potentially.
Maybe not.
So then, okay, so that means you rule out A and D.
I really want to say C, the like umpire calls, because they are specifically Mario in the Game Boy version. But I don't know.
Yeah, but we covered the cute. I said apart from the cuter graphics, I was including the Mario. Like, we had talked about how the NES Tennis does not look like I don't know if you had looked up any screens for the NES Tennis. It does not look like the Game Boy one.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to go, my gut is telling me C. However, last question, you did try to help me out.
No, I was impartial.
And I feel like you're
time.
trying to talk. I feel like you're trying to talk me out of C, so I'm going to go B.
Wow, what an answer. It's B.
All right, let's go.
There was no music at all in the NES Tennis. It was kind of unsettling, actually. I think that the reason, I don't know if you had noticed, but in the title menu of the Game Boy Tennis, there's one player, two player, and then just a toggle that lets you turn the music on and off. So with this being a really direct port of the NES Tennis, which had no music, I can see them wanting to turn that on and off just in case the people who got it on the Game Boy were like, oh, I didn't think it was supposed to have music. Let's turn that off.
I did notice that, and that would have been a very intelligent, I guess, way to approach that question. But at least we got it down to a 50-50, and we're good. So I'm now 1 for 1, or 1 for 2, right. I guess. 1 and 1. So one more. I'm not going to increase my percentage, but hopefully I can not hurt it too badly.
Okay. Question 3. A port of tennis on the Game Boy wasn't the only place that this sports title ended up being ported to. It was ultimately brought over to some of Nintendo's own systems, but which was it not ever brought over to? A, the Virtual Boy. B, the e-reader. C, the Wii. Or D, the Switch.
I know it was brought over to the e-reader, or I'm like 80+% confident I read that. I feel like the Switch has just a bunch of retro games, so
because Switch has Game Boy.
I'm like very torn between Virtual Boy and Wii.
Because the Switch has the collections of games, and the Wii had Virtual Console. I don't really even remember the e-reader other than a thing that had cards.
Honestly, the only reason I'm pretty confident in that is because I'm pretty sure I read that on something. But I'm going C. Final answer. Hearing what you said, I think that's wrong, but I'm sticking to my initial gut.
The crowd loves a hero willing to stick to his guns. It's A. It was the Virtual Boy.
Dang it. As soon as I mentioned, like, I had decided C, and then as soon as I kind of explained that, oh yeah, the Switch has tons of like retro games and like not emulators, but like...
Yeah, they are. They're emulation. They're built-in emulation.
Yeah, I was like, I had already committed to C in my mind, but I was like, oh, I'm sure the Wii has the same thing. But, ooh, okay, that was a bad showing. That was 1 out of 3. So that'll definitely hurt my overall percentage, but that's okay.
It got on the e-reader, the Wii, the Switch, but not on the Virtual Boy. Virtual Boy actually got a Mario Tennis. I think it was called Mario's Tennis, which was way different than what we were playing. It has Mario characters that are selectable, and the perspective for that one's tennis court is almost horizontal because it was for the Virtual Boy, so it was used to show off the 3D effect there.
Got it.
All right, so that's all the questions for you. Sorry about the poor showing there, but now it's time for our question to carry over into next week's episode. So while we are talking about all these different ports of tennis going to other places, it wasn't just on Nintendo's hardware. Nintendo actually ported the game for some of their own software too. A famous example of this are embedded versions of tennis and some other NES games into which title that was released on the GameCube.
Oh, I think I actually know this one. Hopefully our listeners do as well, but we'll find out next week. But I think I know this one. I think I know this one.
Too bad you don't get points for the answer or for the audience question.
Right. This is 2 audience questions in a row that I feel quite confident about, but that's all right. That's all right. Thanks for listening to Critical DMG. If you would like to support us further, please leave a review wherever you get your podcasts and maybe recommend us to your friends or anyone else you know who might like the show. It really helps us out, and we really appreciate it. Next week, we're going to be talking about another sports game in baseball, and so we'll kind of see how that goes.
Take me out to the ball game.
Buy me some Cracker Jacks, and I don't know the song. All right, bye, everyone.